Well, good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to another of our Wednesday webinars, or Webinar Wednesdays, we like to call it as well. Today, we're in our number 7 of dealing with the pandemic crisis and how it's affected your small business. And we're going to continue to do that today, as we are for several more Wednesdays in a row. So good afternoon, my name's Kelly Bearden, and I am the director of the CSU Bakersfield Small Business Development Center. And a little bit more about the SBDC program as we kind of move on. The SBDC program has been around for about, probably since 1980. It's been around for 40 years, and we have been in Kern County and Bakersfield for almost 30 years now. The last 10 years at California State University, Bakersfield. So a little bit about the program and about what we do is, as we look at a few of our sponsors that make this show very possible. The program is in all 50 states, 1,000 SBDCs across the country. In California, we have 6 regions, of which we're part of the Central California region. And within the Central California region, we have 6 centers. We have ours located in beautiful downtown Bakersfield that covers Kern, Inyo, and Mono counties, and all the way up to the state of Nevada, south into the Pacific Ocean is the rest of the Central California region. So there's a center in San Luis Obispo at Cal Poly, one in Salinas in Monterey County, and also in Modesto, Merced, and Fresno throughout the San Joaquin Valley. So welcome any of you attending from those centers. We're going to get right into this today. I know we've ran a little bit long the last, probably several weeks. So we're just going to get in and get going today and try to get more of your questions and get you out of here on time. So what do we know today? What's new today? Well, we know that there's more stimulus here, and actually the PPP started funding again on Monday. It is out there, it is going, and things are going. So we're going to find out today a little bit more about that and where we are with EIDL. EIDL, the wonderful acronym for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan that you apply directly through SBA. The portal has been shut down for about a week. We'll provide you an update on what's going on there, how much money is there, what we anticipate is going to happen, because that's all we can do right now is guess and anticipate. And that's why each and every day brings a new story and more details on these programs, as so many of them are implemented across the country and so much money is flowing to small business hands. We'll keep you up to date on what we know. So we'll have a little bit more on sole props and independent contractors. How I feel about sole proprietors, self-employed individuals, and also the contractors is that largely they've been left out. So we're going to talk a little bit about what is new for them, including the unemployment portal being active for those particular segment groups for probably the first time ever that started yesterday. Our interim final rules that if you've been somewhat of a regular or on a couple of these anyway, what you found out is that I like to talk about the interim final rules are coming, and the interim final rules are coming. It's making it difficult to provide guidance and information and reliable information that we can give you, our small business clients out there and others, but we will continue to do the best we can. And today we're going to do something I really didn't want to do. And that is, in the absence of the final rules, what's new today is we're going to go through the actual note on the PPP program, which is a 4-page document. Many of you probably have already seen it and viewed it and read it. It's fairly simple as far as a promissory note goes. And but there's some really interesting things in there and maybe can give us a little bit more information to try to start making some really educated decisions on how to spend this money to the maximum benefit to not only our business, but also in our community and everywhere else. So we will continue to look for the interim final rules on the PPP debt forgiveness is what we're talking about there. So last time, I think we talked a little bit about more great ways to use mini employees, and we'll break into that a little bit more. We're we're going to get into restarting your business. And really, we're starting to hear a lot of buzz, and there's starting to be some really detailed talk about restarting your business. And there's some things going on in the community at the regional level and the state level that are starting to make this more of a reality, and really gives us a chance to start welcoming back our customers and trying to keep sure that we survive. And we're going to cover some more that's new today. So as I like to say, I need a prompt, and our poll with the Current Economic Development Foundation is coming up. So let's do a little bit of a poll question. I've had a little bit of fun in the past with these. After, of course, 2 very serious questions, today we'll go with 3 serious questions. And sorry, no Merle Haggard trivia today. But I'm going to launch the first poll, and it's again to try to find out what your current status is with the economic injury disaster loan. It's a little bit different question, but we've been following and asking the question to try to gauge and see how many of you are able to access the program. So the question is, if you applied for EIDL, what is your current status? And it's yes, I've heard I will receive the advance grant. Yes, I've heard or I've received an EIDL loan. No, I have not heard, and I've applied before 3/30. No, I have not heard, and I applied after March the 30th. And really that March 30th day is kind of an EIDL day that we've talked about a lot, because it changed the portal and the way that information was collected by SBA. But get your votes in. We got about 1/3 of you voted now. And oh wow, a lot of you have really not heard and applied after 3/30. So pushing about half or more on that. We'll give you another couple of moments to get in, get your vote tabulated. Again, the question on EIDL, and you see the 4 choices. So we're going to end the poll right now and close that and share it with you. And here's the results that we ended up with. A whopping 55% are no, I have not heard, and I applied after 3/30. And we have a lot of you that have not heard and applied before 3/30, 22%. So nearly 80%, or the 4 out of 5 rule, as I like to call it, have applied but not heard. So we will get into that, and we'll get into a little of the things that you should be looking for if you're in that population. And a lot of you that have heard, numbers going down. So that is a good thing. So, okay, so we're going to stop sharing that poll, and there it was right there. If I didn't share it with you, 55%, 22, 14, and 9. So poll number 2 is going to be a little bit different on PPP for a change. And in the past, we've been gauging how many of you have applied and received, but this poll is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to launch it now, and it is going to be, what is your biggest concern with PPP? Is it, the first answer, not getting the loan, the PPP loan? Is it getting it but not being able to spend it? We also have getting it and not knowing how much of the debt is forgiven. And also getting it and concerns after you have spent it. And if you have any other requests, please use the chat box. And perfectly good time while you vote for me to remind you to put some questions in the Q&A. We're going to try to spend a good amount of time in the questions and answers section today and get you out on time. So hit the questions and answers, and we're up to about 55% of you that have voted. Really getting a good, strong response here. Biggest one right now is number 1 and number 3, number A and number C. So we're going to end the poll. Here's your last chance to get in. 61% of you have voted. And actually, look at that. Number 1 response is not getting it. 44% is your biggest concern. And that could be many of you that have it in process right now. And that's a concern, obviously. Also, middle one, getting it and not knowing how much debt is forgiving. So 32% of you said that in addition. So about 3/4 of you not being able to get the funding, and then not knowing how much of the debt is going to be forgiven. Okay, so for those that were around last week, we introduced a new question, and where is my new question? So we introduced a new question, and actually, where'd my third poll question go? So apparently something happened to it. So we only have 2 poll questions today, but we introduced the poll question last time, and it was about actually the gift card from Chevron that was donated through Chevron to assist small business owners that are going through such a traumatic time. And we're going to give away 10 more of those today, 10 of those $100 gift certificates. And what we'll do is we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. So let's move on from our polls and kind of look at our recent areas that we've covered. So in the past, being our 7th webinar now, we've done a lot with the EIDL and the PPP and other SBA loan programs. We've had local SBA lending experts on, talked about several of the other programs, and then we've gotten into and talked about deferring the debt and expenses, and this stuff is also crucial, is the reason why I wanted to touch on it some more. We're going to focus on cash flow and preserving cash, and so that's important as well. So we're going to look to adapt and look at new creative ways, and we're looking for new opportunities as always. One of the best opportunities, I think I was going to talk about this a little later, but I want to do it now, is one of the best opportunities as you see new things and people adapting. What came from Berlin, Germany, where in a subway station, they had a vending machine that now has face masks for sale, and a nice variety of several different face masks. But boy, what an innovative and creative idea as people start using public transportation in the coming weeks or months, and start thinking of ways of how they can actually not only benefit society in this if you don't have your face mask, but also obviously make a buck or two or more. So we have that as our opportunity to look at this week, and then we're going to continue to look toward that restart and start working on restarting the business and looking at some of the many factors that a business can do right now to work on your business while things are either slower or if you're shut down completely. And as always, we're going to try to stay safe and do a number of things in order to move forward. So what should our priorities be today? As of today, from my perspective, my priority is to get a plan for both EIDL and the 3P. Those of you, many of you are kind of in process right now where I think getting the PPP is a concern, and we're going to discuss specifically these 2 programs in a minute, but really start laying out a plan of attack. We know that with EIDL that number one, we're finding that there's the advance that's out there. And you notice that SBA has not really been calling that a grant. They've been calling it an advance. And this is something that in our final rules that we're lacking that I think is going to come out. But after spending a little bit more time in the note for the PPP, I get the impression now that an EIDL advance, if you get a 3P loan, is going to be not forgiven debt. And that's just my guess and speculation based on reading the note right now. But that's something to think about. If it's going to be unforgiven debt, you want to make sure you don't use your EIDL for payroll or any of the other categories that could be that. You're going to want to use it for suppliers and some of the other working capital needs that your business has. Even though we've seen the average EIDL loan is only about $4,300, still using that effectively and having a plan. We're going to talk a little bit about the PPP again and getting your employees back and some of the rules and some of the regulations that go with that. Boy, I love this one, cash flow, and really managing your cash flow and really looking at the budgeting aspects and the numbers, forecasting moving ahead. So very important, especially any time, but really in this time, in this era. I remember seeing a report from last year that was put out by JP Morgan Chase about the average small business only has about 29 days of working capital and cash. And that's very traditional. Even very profitable, successful small businesses tie their cash up. And in a time like this, when it's not coming in, the forecasting and management is so much more crucial. We're going to move on and eventually start maximizing your business for the restart. And I'm hoping that's next week. And really getting into the restarts, because that's a lot of good things that are going on. I know we might have had a couple of businesses in Kern County participate in a call with the governor on retail businesses, retail small businesses, and them restarting. And so that is something that is going on behind the scenes that we've seen. And there's discussion now and to a number of different phases of what can open faster than others, but we want to get into the restart and do that. Too many employees. That's our new segment. If you have a PPP loan and you cannot completely utilize all your employees, then you have the definition, my definition of too many employees with not too much to do. So as we start moving back, we're going to try to recover our sales. We're going to try to come up with innovative and creative marketing ideas and also use social media. And this could be in a different way than it has been in the past, because everything is not going to be like it was on February the 29th of this year. We're going to look at other funding, because funding could become an issue for businesses throughout this year. And another priority is to really start looking as a business owner on your HR, updating your employee manuals, and also look at your options, and also really start looking at every step that you can take to make your business safe. Because really the best thing that can happen is that you're able to open and you keep any of your employees from becoming sick, or any of your customers that could really drag your individual business into a closure, isolation type of situation that could be devastating for your situation. And I told you the best I saw this week, and that is mask in a vending machine in a subway in Berlin, Germany. Okay, last week, I think we mentioned last call for EIDL and PNP and PPP. We're going to do the same thing this week. It's really coming down to, if you're not in literally on PPP, you've got to be in by today. And there are some options that are available, and we'll talk about a few more that are generally fintech options, or at least an online application that you can do as quickly as possible. Okay, so EIDL and EIDL Advance. So what we know right now is that the EIDL portal has been shut down since last week. Last week's webinar, we went into some really detailed numbers on what had happened with the first round of EIDL before they ran out of money. We were pretty close with what we were speculating the amount of money that they had, because they spent about $9 billion. And this next round is going to be substantially larger. Now, of that $9 billion, they had essentially received 4 million applications for that through different phases. Of that, only 750,000 had been funded to this point. So we have $9 billion out. We're adding 60 billion more. And like I mentioned there, so many of these are already in process. So if you've applied and you're in that that almost 75% range that we saw in our poll, that you're concerned about where you are, we're going to talk about that in just a second. So with $60 billion out there, it's going to go a lot farther. And I believe the EIDL portal will be opening as early as this week, as early as maybe as early as today. It could have opened today. I haven't even checked. But Wednesday the 29th, I would expect it to be open by the 1st of May on Friday. When it's open, if you haven't got in yet, it's imperative that you get in right away, because with so much already in process, even with the added 60 billion, we do not know the distribution of what is going to be an EIDL loan, which is generally averaged about a little over 200,000, or an EIDL advance, which has been over 4,000 and is basically given for $1,000 per employee that you have back on February 15th. So my guess is that it's likely going to be, when it's all said and done and we get all the money out, here's my guess right now. We'll see how close I come. But I'm guessing we're going to come up with about 56 billion in loans and about 12 billion in advances, of which right now of advances we have about 3 or 4 billion out. So, and I know 56 and 12 equal 68, and that's about what it's going to be, 68 and change. So specifically, what do you want to do if you have an EIDL application that's pending? I heard on a call from SBA Disaster this Monday that, and I think this is consistent with what we've mentioned over the last several weeks, is that if you have an EIDL application, if you have applied and you have received confirmation and the number begins with 2, most likely that was filed before March 30th. And what you need to do is you need to go into the portal once it reopens and refile, and do that as quickly as possible. If you have an EIDL application beginning with 3, most likely your application is in process. And typically what we were looking at 14 to 21 days, and this was probably 2 weeks ago. So once it opens again, and we expect it to open, I believe it's down for the main reason is they're putting so much into PPP right now. And with the PPP portal opening up on Monday, get it up and going, get things smoothing out a little bit, and then we go to EIDL. And then hopefully we get our final rules on debt forgiveness for PPP. So that's what we know right now on EIDL, and that's what we're sticking to. If you have questions, you know, there's a few resources you could try. You do have to have your application number. We have also talked with a number of people that have run into problems to where they either didn't get upon filing, and most of this happened, it seems like I've had at least a half a dozen individuals that this has happened to around right when the new portal opened on March 30th. And they submitted, but they didn't get a confirming email, which didn't actually have an application number. And it's very difficult for SBA to go in now and to try to find out what's going on there. So again, if you have an application that begins with the number 2, refile as soon as possible. If you have an EIDL application beginning with the number 3, it's likely that your loan is in process, and either your loan or most likely your advance, and we'll move forward from there. Now, with so much of this next allocation for EIDL being in loans, you know, it's kind of up in the air about a couple of things. One is the average EIDL loan, disaster loan, was $200,000. The maximum that we've seen is one for $500,000. And it's my guess anyway, and it's only a guess and speculation based on information that we've been receiving, is that most likely if you filed early, you're going to be considered for the disaster loan. I don't know how far out from filing from around the first day that we saw, which was maybe March 18th. From that point is when I saw the first EIDL loan go in. And it was a different format. It required a lot more information. Your profit and loss statement, your personal financial tax returns were all uploaded and sent in, and SBA is able to make a decision. If you filed after March 30th, you went through the EIDL portal, which has a much more streamlined application process. You can do it in 15 or 20 minutes. But generally, SBA doesn't have the information needed in order to underwrite an EIDL loan. They have it for an EIDL advance, but not an EIDL loan. So it's going to be interesting to see, for those that filed after March 30th, if you're going to get the much more appealing long-term rate, or excuse me, long-term loan at a very low interest rate of 3.75. So there's where we are on EIDL. PPP time. You know, it's one of my favorite subjects. So again, the portal opened on Monday. And just a little brief history, there was $349 billion, and basically on, I believe it was April the 16th, last Thursday, the funding was pretty much gone, was used, and the portal closed. But the next day, I believe there was new funding and put in place, and they opened the portal. I think the president signed on Friday. They reopened the portal on Monday. So, the portal, the funding portal that SBA uses is a thing called ETRAN. I think it stands for electronic transmission. And so it is the pipeline for actually moving the loans from the banks to the SBA. And so that is number one, it's a dated system. It's a 20-year-old pipeline. It was never designed to do the volume that they're trying to run through it right now. And it has had, a little bit of issues on Monday of getting loans in. So really, the one thing you have to remember about PPP is going in, there were basically 1,700 SBA lenders across this country. Right now, there are over, I think it's over 5,000 right now that are doing the PPP loans. So there's about 3,300 more lenders, twice as many almost as before. That were added to the existing. So you have kind of a crapshoot going on right now about what lenders are getting in. And that is what I detect. Some reports are from lenders, maybe in the Midwest. I think I heard a couple back there that said that they had 7 or 8 loans got in, and then all of a sudden the portal locked up on them. SBA is actually having banks actually upload these in 5,000 or less intervals, and that was the plan, 5,000 or less. And many of these lenders have far less than that, and so it's really, everybody's trying to get it in. And it's like the old, when you listen to the radio station and they called up and they said they had a $100 gift card from Chevron, and for the 9th caller, it was, everybody calls in and tries to win it. That's what everybody's doing right now with this portal. So that is the main thing right now. Is I know many of you by this poll have a lot of loans that are probably that you haven't processed with your lender before the portal closed last Thursday or whenever. So what we're finding that it's just a crapshoot. If you have it in, you have a good chance of succeeding, but it's just whatever's coming up. And there are no numbers out yet. I think last week and the week before we shared numbers that were kind of a testament of what was going on. And what happened was that, essentially a lot of lenders that are getting in now are smaller. And it's kind of interesting because the dynamic of if you look at the 20 largest banks in America and the number of PPP loans that they did, it is far less than the percentage of normal SBA lending that they do, and is really, really small. So it was kind of surprising to see that many smaller lenders not only get approved for the program, but actually get their deals in. So why is that important? One reason it's important is we saw that with this second round, there was going to be $310 billion, and $60 billion of that was going to be for underserved markets, women, minorities, underserved communities. So a lot of those, we thought we were going to be able to slide in rather easily, and it was kind of a bigger deal that it was separate from the rest of the funds. But now we're finding that there are so many smaller lenders that that's the majority of the deals that are going in. So that's what's going on with trying to get that particular loan and getting your share of the money right now. The other thing is there's 2 aspects of what you can do with this. And, I have pretty much preached for the last 7 weeks, or I guess we've only had the PPP for 5, is on the debt forgiveness part of it. So many of our small business clients and so many of you small business owners out there that I've talked to or emailed or whatever, have expressed that they really need that debt forgiveness. And that is really what we're hinging on the final rules. So they were due on the 26th, which was Sunday. They didn't come. And I can tell you that I have received so many great questions that really explain the problem that we're having. All the different unique situations and issues that can come up with a small business. There are literally dozens and dozens of different scenarios that I've seen myself. So just the questions that you're having and the difficulty that you're having navigating this and trying to figure out what is forgiven and what is not going to be forgiven is a complex issue. So hopefully we'll have a little bit more flexibility. And, you know, I really, this is the one part that I'm really not looking forward to, because now I'm going to have basically verbatim the note. And just because I don't have a copy, let me just show you, for those of you that don't have the note, what it kind of looks like with its parts covered up. So if you can see that, how's that? How's that for live TV? There it is. And then it comes into being a 4-page note, okay? Very simple, 4 pages. We're gonna go over page 2 right now. So go back to page 2, and the reason page 2 is so important is because it really talks about forgiveness. And not only does it talk about forgiveness, it does it under the acknowledgments that you as the borrower acknowledge and agree as followed. This loan, it's the first paragraph really, let's come down to here about halfway through, because that's the purpose of the loan that they were giving. But then after, you know, a paragraph of the purpose, it says some or all of the loan may be forgiven. Forgiveness of the loan is only available for principal that is used for the limited purposes that qualify for forgiveness under SBA requirements as specified in the interim final rule. Interim final rule. So, and you have to remember that we're getting into this right now because this is the document that you're signing, and it's really, other than some other speculation out there, there are some good resources, and I can give you some out there. I have not been comfortable sharing them just because we don't have the final rule, and I'd rather stick with what we know, and what we know is in that note is what you sign. And if you've already got your PPP and you've signed it, then these are the acknowledgments that you're signing to. So also under the purpose, borrower understands that to obtain forgiveness, borrower must request it and provide documentation in accordance with the SBA requirements in the final rule again, and certify that the amounts borrower is requesting be forgiven qualify under those requirements. Now you're starting to see why I've been so adamant about the final rules. Borrower also understands and that borrower shall remain responsible under the loan for any amounts not forgiven. Okay, so now let's move on a little bit and try to see a little bit more detail so we can try to make some head or you know, some head or tails out of this situation, because it really is a coin flip. Okay, maybe not a coin flip, because I think we can come up with some educated guesses on moving forward. So here are the proceeds of the loan that the permitted uses. We know pretty much the permitted uses are going to fall on the lines of payroll costs as defined in the CARES Act, and the interim final rule that was dated April 2nd, which don't be confused because there are several interim final rules that come out. There was one that came out on the 24th on a couple of issues. And generally these are given to lenders because, again, this whole forgiveness process is going to be you providing documentation to your lender who requests it. So the cost obviously are going to be payroll cost and continuation of growth help. Now, in reading that, one of the things that a couple of people had asked me questions about was, gee, I know I have these costs that I need to have. Can I actually go out and get a short-term group health insurance policy for my employees? And who knows, if things bounce back quicker, maybe I'll be able to keep it. It'll maybe provide them some incentive to come back rather than be on unemployment, makes the job more valuable to other people looking, maybe looking to come to work for us. Without the final rules, and it says continuous group health, I don't know if you can initiate one as part of the PPP. So the other thing is going to be that is forgiven, permitted, is interest payments and a covered mortgage obligation. But please note, it does say mortgage prepayments or principal payments are not allowed. We also have rent payments and we have utilities, and we've covered these. Interest payments on any other debt obligation that were incurred, or refinancing of an SBA disaster loan. And, you know, that's kind of interesting, the other interest payments. Because, you know, you really don't hear a lot about other interest other than mortgage, unless they're specifically mean your mortgage there. So in continuing with the loan forgiveness, and I know I'm reading this and you're seeing it, but it is what it is. It's going to try to give us a little bit more directive. During this next paragraph, the next important thing is during the 8 weeks beginning from the first date of the disbursement of this loan. The disbursement could come electronically if it goes right into your account, or it could come via cashier's check. So, you know, I have had some borrowers that I've talked to about this, and they've said, as far as I'm concerned, the first day of disbursement of this loan is when I put it in my checking account. When I get it into my business checking account, it is there. Now, it needs to be relatively soon when it comes in the mail, but they are starting their 8-week clock right then. The final rules might say otherwise, but that is the interpretation, and that's what we're having to do now, is to interpret. So that's one thing. And then the 8 weeks, and we're getting a lot of questions on, gee, 8 weeks, do you think it's going to stay at 8 weeks? Will the final rule go to 12 weeks? Could it go to 10 weeks or 14? And I would like to think it would, but it is so ingrained into this note that you have signed already that I don't know how easy it is going to be to do that. The other thing is that you see other places, I don't know if we see it here, that the program ends on June 30th. But for those that were still getting PPP loan forgiveness, and, you know, let's say yours is in process right now, congratulations. Maybe it'll be here on May 15th. And if it is there on May 15th, your first day, your 8 weeks, typically, you know, that's, let's just say 2 months, July 15th. And that's maybe outside that June 30th. So I need to verify that June 30th, but that was a date that was thrown around a lot, especially since it is taking a second group of funds. So forgiveness can be calculated, payroll protection under the provisions, etc. And for those of you that don't have a note yet, I can send you this information to you. Again, really some of the key things and key factors that you have to keep in mind that I think are pretty black and white. 75% of this needs to be for payroll cost. And really the other thing that we see a lot of is pertaining to full-time equivalents. And it doesn't say necessarily hiring the same people back, but maintaining the same level and same amount of payroll. And everything gets into full-time equivalents. So, or at least that's mentioned frequently. So if you have, you know, 4 full-time people and 2 half-time people, the 2 half-time people equal 1 full-time equivalent, you have 5 employees. If that's what you had more or less the composition before, you know, I think you're pretty good to go. So, but see, here's the big one that I talked a little bit about earlier. If you'd received an EIDL, the amount of said advance shall be subtracted from the loan forgiveness amount. My interpretation of that is if you receive an EIDL without this PPP, your EIDL stays as more of an advance or a grant, whereas here it is an advance on this particular loan. So final rules will be helpful. The amount of total forgiveness may be reduced if the borrower reduces the number of their employees. You know, commonly I think it's reflected that it's the optimum strategy, and the goal behind this is to bring back as many employees as you had before. And we know that that's not always feasible and not always possible. So we'll continue to work with the rules the best we can. Can't exceed the principal amount of the balance. So you can't ask for more forgiveness than the size of your loan. You're going to have to supply documentation, and there's a lot of documentation that could be asked for you. And here's some of that documentation. You know, include payroll tax filings with IRS, state, income, payroll, unemployment insurance filings, canceled checks. You know, this is just some of the stuff. But what this tells me is that you have to keep very accurate records, and most people have very accurate payroll records. So comparing these records to the ones that you had to get the maximum amount of the forgiveness. And that's that. Oof. I know, it's mind-boggling. So that is what we know in going through the note. And I know many of you haven't seen the note, or maybe we offered a few things in there that maybe helped a little bit. So let's move on from the PPP, and hopefully we'll have final regs by next Wednesday. And if we do, entire show probably. So great things your business can do with too many employees. You know, last week, you know, we came up with some ideas, and this is coming back to the fact that you're going to be restarting your business and you're not going to have enough work for the number of employees you have. And again, with most of you, or a lot of you, your goal is to get the maximum amount of forgiveness. And you get the maximum amount of forgiveness by having that 75% threshold level and bringing back the number of employees that you had earlier. So this is the reason and kind of why we shift into that, and a lot of different ideas that come up. And super clean, HR handbook reopening strategy, involve everybody in strategic planning, and social media, crowdfunding campaign, adapt, change, and actually chase revenue. So those are some ideas to what to do with people when you have so many of them. Saw another one that was painting the back of their building this week. We had an excellent suggestion from someone. Thank you, Ann. And if you recall last week, I said if somebody sent me in some really great ideas, Chevron gift card is coming your way. So Ann, congratulations. You win the first Chevron gift card today. For these ideas, and that's a gift card, a gas card through the Kern Economic Development Foundation of $100. So congratulations. Improve internal processes. And this is more of a office type, so I really kind of like this. And we're going to start seeing some really interesting aspects about I'd call it social distancing, but it'd be workplace distancing when this comes back. And something we'll probably talk about in the future. But look at your organizational chart, cross-train your employees, document what they do, work on evaluations, organizational evaluations, inventory. It's a good time to do inventory, dispose of scrap and other things. So optimize work setting setups and provide online training skills. So, and excellent ideas of what you can do in kind of a relaxed time if the government is paying for your employees and you're trying to maximize the total amount of loan forgiveness available. So thanks for that, Ann. And before we go here, I am going to actually go into here. And so good, here we go. And just go through a quick thing. And really now's the chance for you to win the $100 gift card by saying thanks Chevron in the chat box. So the next 9 people that jump in, as in last week, we gave 9 in the chat box, and look at you go. I'd say if you're not in by now, I'm sorry. You're probably a little late watching that number fly. So we'll do the evaluation for that and give away another $1,000 worth of gift cards this week for gas cards for small businesses that are impacted and need it so badly. Okay, so moving on, and this is kind of a little example that I had hoped to get into. And I really feel bad for my self-employed individuals and sole proprietors. We weren't able to spend a lot of time, and I'm only going to try to spend a few minutes in here today. But I want to give you an example of a mom and pop restaurant that had no employees. They're kind of things of the past, they're kind of relics, but there are some still around, and mom and pop would actually qualify for a PPP loan. I hope they applied. Maybe it's not too late. But here's an example of a profit and loss statement for mom and pop, to where they do about $30,000 a month. They probably have a little bit of labor down here in operating expenses. You'll see rule of thumb wise on expenditures for purchases, you're looking at 44. That's a little high. Usually a third on purchases, a third on payroll, operating expenses, and then the rest they keep as far as net income. So, but on sole proprietors without employees, what they're looking at is for PPP is the net income. And so you take your basic 2-month average of last year documented by a tax return, and it comes up to a monthly earning, and there's your PPP amount. So they could apply for a $14,583 PPP. And as far as debt forgiveness, I'm assuming, even though there's not final rules, that they are going to go off of last year. Mom and pop will be back in work. There's 2 of them. They'll be back. If they did an EIDL, they could apply for a $2,000 EIDL, or actually receive $2,000 under that program. So there it is. The loan amount could be 14. So the max grant is fairly easy. And away we go. So mom and pop have no employees, but a nice, simple, basic. And there were some really good questions, and I think I didn't answer one of them earlier, and I apologize. And it was on self-employed with employees. And there was a final rule that came out on that a while back, and it's really detailed, and I'll try to get it out to you if there's still time. We used this example last time when we kind of looked at a way to maximize your PPP. We looked at Kelly's Grill, who actually did have a lot of employees, purchases, payroll, kind of along the lines as far as a profit and loss would look like from this business. Look at that, less money, made a little less than mom and pop based on revenue that was more than twice as much. Makes me feel like a bad manager of my grill here. So we'll go into look at last year, and because I want to point this out because of one factor that might be relevant once we get final rules and what you could think about for forgiveness. And that is going to be the minimum wage and its impact, because remember, our employees for 2019, many of those were minimum wage employees that were paid $1 less per hour. So with 2020 and the new minimum wage, that kicks up. That adds another layer of complexity in here. My grill had, had basically 11 employees, of which 4 were part-time. We calculated that based on the average salary, average cost an hour would be $14. I figure the average cost per hour for one main reason is I want to know, with my loan amount being $50,000 here, I want to know how much I need to spend on payroll at a 75% level to get maximum actual forgiveness. And then I can also then, by this calculation, I can conclude with how many hours that I need to work each week for the 8 weeks. And it makes it a little easier to schedule my time, knowing that I have to hit this 75% level. And I'm doing it with straight payroll. There's also state income taxes that you can do. There's also some health benefits that could be included in there and other things. But my example, I'm trying to keep simple. And there shows the number of hours. So looking at it in 2020, I've increased my salaries or my wages for my part-time and full-time employees to reflect my part-timers making minimum wage and my full-timers a little bit more than minimum. And going from there, my average cost per hour went up, which meant that the number of hours that I had is actually less to come up with that same full-time equivalent. And here's my full-time equivalent over here. Obviously, a 40-hour worker is one, my 6 full-timers, and then my 4 half-timers that end up with 2. So it's this full-time equivalent, and I know that many of your businesses have 30-hour per week employees that are 0.75 full-time equivalents, but it really seems that that is going to be a driving factor once we get the final rules, is maintaining the full-time equivalent so you maintain the same amount of people, even though you're going to have to pay them more likely because of the minimum wage than your calculation earlier. Okay. Let's change the share here. Go back here. I hope that helped explain a little bit. And let's just touch on some other funding. We've talked about this in the past, so I'm not going to spend hardly any time, but bridge loans are going to be coming out and other funding is going to be coming available. I really want people to really think about crowdfunding and ways of actually reaching out to your customer base. It is so important for pre-sales and for marketing. There's a lot of opportunity there if things get really tight, if you get shut out of some of this money. Let's get creative and figure out some ways of strategic partnering and other unique ways to actually to work with these situations. Real quickly, for some certain business owners, sole proprietors, and self-employed individuals, along with contractors, the government opened the portal for the state of California EDD. You can go there and now apply online. It's really the first time ever, but unemployment assistance is now available for business owners. The rates, I didn't write them down, but they are different rates depending on different times of year. So you can go in there. There are other resources, and thanks to Lou, who gave me one from Paycheck, which is out there. There's payroll calculators that, based on the information we know, kind of help us. There's been some also with some law firms. I know Ken sent me one. There's the spreadsheet example I have. There's tons of other resources that I can give you. And I'm going to actually include a resource page for next week that is going to be very comprehensive of a lot of the other sources that are out there and a lot of the other resources that are out there for many of these, many of our small businesses in the forms of grants and other things. So moving forward, every small business, cash flow, leadership, forward thinking, a business continuity plan, and then executing that plan. So we all need cash. We need leadership at this time. And we need to really be thinking that times are really different and they're going to be different. And how can we change that? Here are some of the things that are coming up on our future webinars as I grab a drink. And let's move on to some questions. It's our webinar for next week. Leave that up. Okay, here we go. Let's start with a UI question, unemployment. I applied for unemployment as a self-employed, was denied due to excessive earnings. I made more than $450. Can I apply for the pandemic UI? I would apply again because it doesn't seem like $450 is excessive amount for unemployment. And I would just apply because maybe since the portal just opened yesterday, they had some glitches, but I would definitely go in. Okay, John asked, the first wave of PPP indicated that employee levels needed to be cured by 6/30/20. On the second wave, is there any talk about extending that? It would sure make sense, John. It would really make sense if they did extend it, and maybe that's an avenue if by extending that and the rationale because of the PPPs that are going in and getting processed this week. But then again, if they get everything done and all the money spent by Friday, we're at 4/30. And if they turn around most of those notes in 5 days, you're just around the 4th of July. So we hope there is, but John, I have no idea. It would make sense, as it would be hopeful that we could extend it past those dates and bring back smaller groups of employees, but without final rules, all we can do is do the best that we can to prepare ourselves for that. Okay, any way to get information status of my PPP? I went through 2 different banks. Neither can tell me where I stand. I was in the door from the beginning. So, Doug, I wish I had a better answer for that, but the banks are going to know more. And it's really, as we mentioned, it's really kind of turning into more or less a crapshoot of trying to get those up. I could guarantee you, I would think both banks are trying to get theirs through the portal. They're trying to get them through E-Tran and trying to get them funded. Whether they get them there, I don't know. Wished I had a better answer. What if our employees do not want to return, or if they want to stay on unemployment? Can we hire to replace them and still keep the employee numbers the same? Well, I'm not an HR specialist. Can we offer some type of bonus or hazard pay to entice them back? That is a question that I would think you could hire back at a higher rate. The question has not really been identified in the note. The note did say that you can't bring them back at a substantially lower rate, but I would think that, and this is a common problem we're running into, is particularly with the $600 bonus unemployment on the federal side of things, which really is really has many of you bent, I know. An additional $600, and it's hard to compete with that because you can't pay them enough money. Chefs making $25 an hour on unemployment, etc. I think that, Jennifer, I think you will be able to, but absent the final rules, you're on your own. When do we know when or if EIDL will open again? It'll hopefully be by Friday. We are a husband and wife sole proprietor. Okay, that's LLC with no employees. We do not pay ourselves as employees, but rather treat the LLC as a disregarded entity through Schedule Cs. Can we apply for PPP, and is it forgivable? Well, let me take the back part of that. If you do apply for that, it most likely is forgivable because that is kind of a simpler version of what we're seeing as being forgivable. Not positive on that question as far as being able to actually apply. Since you do come through as Schedule C, I would say yes, you can apply. Now, one of the problems is the banks have seen so many straightforward deals where they have their businesses that have 15 employees. And I think that there is some, you got to be with the right lender. You got to be with somebody who understands that situation. We did see some, I believe, single member LLCs that got through and things like that. So I think actually with the distribution coming to a Schedule C rather than a K1, my interpretation on that rule would be, yes, you could apply. I would apply if I were you. Okay, we received our PPP. We're a non-essential business and we'll start paying our employees next week. Can we bring a couple of them in each day to work, practicing social distancing and use for cleaning and getting ready? I think that's a great idea, especially since you're not open to the public. So yes, you can, absolutely. They do not have to be returned to their same former task, which could have been when this happens. Sally asked, what time on Friday will EIDL open? Sally, it could open up in 5 minutes. They're probably not going to announce like they did with the PPP and the platform. There is a chance they could make a kind of a preemptive announcement, but my guess is it's going to be open when it's open. I would go to SBA Disaster Loan, their website, and I would just leave it up there and check it every once in a while. Is there any way to tell where you might fall in the queue based on your EIDL number? John, I believe the difference between the 2 and the 3, as we mentioned earlier, was on the filing dates. And, you know, everything that I've heard so far has been very positive about those that have an EIDL application beginning with 3, that it is in process and to expect 14 to 21 days. Can I apply for both? I applied for EIDL the first week in April. Yes, yes, you can. And you can if you have employees or if you meet any of these other requirements of the PPP and their rules and regulations. And again, that's 2, you want to go in and put your information in the portal. If you have a 2 application number for EIDL, a 3, you should be okay. It's a question. We applied through our big bank, but then again tried through PayPal. Have you heard about whether PayPal is having success? I have not. I think that PayPal, being a fintech company and being in money transfers for a long time, it's just coming down to that e-trans. And the e-trans system is, as I mentioned about 4 times now, I think kind of we're finding it to be whatever gets in the pipe gets uploaded and gets in. The good news is there is $310 billion. And whereas there was a large backlog, you know, and maybe it won't all be gone. So I still think the odds are in your favor if you were in, say, before the last shutdown. How will PPP forgiveness work when you're self-employed? Judy, I think I might have went over that little spreadsheet example, but that is basically how. It's your Schedule C. Your Schedule C if you're an independent contractor. So it's going to be based on your tax return from 2019, which you will have to have done. It is a requirement that it doesn't have to be filed, but it has to be complete and you have to know the numbers off of it. Okay, let's moving right along. Full-time equivalent, is it based on a 40-hour or a 30-hour work week? In most things, full-time equivalent is a 40-hour work week. So, but it could come down to, I think I recall reading in one of those wonderful notes that it could come down what is standard practice for your business. So if your business is a full-time person is a 32-hour per employee, then I would maybe, you might be able to make the argument that that's a full-time equivalent in your business. If you have a lot of people that are pulling down a 40-hour work week, it's going to probably be based on that. What if you use savings to continue to pay employees as I count toward forgiveness? Jim, it's going to probably depend on the date of when that note is, that you execute your note. So I think it's going to be from that point on, lacking any final rules. So if you continue to pay employees, we've been trying to encourage people to pay them out of your, if you get an EIDL grant or if you get an EIDL advance, is to use the EIDL advance. And it's just going to come down to perhaps the timing on that and what the final rules say. Okay, a few more questions here. Oh, thanks, Chevron. That doesn't quite work in the Q&A, sorry. Got to go into the chat box. And we'll have your winners for you next week. Okay, Christy, do you have to be profitable to qualify for EIDL? And the question is no. What you have to have is you have to have employees, and since you are a fairly new restaurant, and a very good one too, I might add, you're not profitable yet. So again, it goes back to the number of employees for the advanced portion. It might be more difficult on the loan side of things. So to be profitable on the loan side, the EIDL loan, but if you're looking at an EIDL advance and you have 5 employees, for example, then the advance would be $5,000 and not based on your profitability. If you want any of the other resources, the spreadsheet or some of the things that we had talked about, I will try to find you in the chat box and send those out to you. That usually takes up a good chunk of my Wednesday evening. So Don't have any problem doing that at all. I applied for EIDL on the 29th. Ooh, that is right around that cutoff. And my number starts with 3. I haven't received an email or any notification. How do I confirm I'm in process? Bob, if it was me, what I would do is I would go in, because I think if you applied on the 29th, because on Monday, the 30th is when the portal changed. On Sunday, the 29th of March, I think it was an older process of uploading. And it's good that you have the confirmation, but I would probably, if it was me, I would go in once it is opened, and I would put in, just kind of refresh your application. I'd put it back in. And the reason I say that is that on the 30th, the portal changed dramatically to where it was much easier. And the key thing was it opened up the advanced portion, where it does ask for your banking information, your routing number, your account number, and also the bank that you bank with. So I would do that. So yes, we will be back. And yes, that says May 5th, but I was so happy with Cinco de Mayo coming up. I forgot that it was Tuesday. Our webinar will be on May 6th next week. So thank you for correcting me. The employees are not allowed to work due to state mandated rules. There is unemployment. Should I pay them for doing nothing just to have the amounts forgiven? That doesn't seem to make much sense. It doesn't seem to make much sense. So a few of the things that you might consider is you really have to do your own independent analysis on this. And the thing about that makes it attractive to have employees that do nothing is that you have retained them on your employee list. They will be able to come to work once we restart our economy and our small businesses. They will be there, but what it does is 75% of your amount, it opens up that other 25% that can be used for rent and utilities. So it's in many situations, it doesn't make a lot of sense. There's really not a lot of things you can do with too many employees. So maybe you start thinking outside the box and some of the solutions that could be out there, such as maybe they work for you, but you loan them to a nonprofit entity. Maybe a local food bank needs some assistance right now, or someone else somewhere else, and the employee doesn't mind helping out. So what it does is it shows that you're a community-minded business owner, and it also benefits the community while perhaps even advancing some of your goals by trying to get more of your PPP for other things other than payroll. But I agree, it doesn't make a lot of sense for a lot of people. Okay, a few more questions. Dang it, I ran long again. What's wrong with me? Okay, let's go here. Should I not accept the PPP if I can't spend it according to the contract? Maybe I can return what I don't use. And, you know, again, what I would do is I would look at your own independent business situation. If there's a way to spend 75% for employees, and really that's really the key, is spending the 75% on employees, but really the crucial piece that we're missing in the rules and regulations are the fact that we don't know the full-time equivalents, and we don't know how that's going to factor in. So just don't know how that's going to pay out, and it's really something you have to look at, though. I learned yesterday my PPP will be funded. Well, congratulations, Jim. Must I spend it? Jim, you got to spend it in the next 60 days. Do I need to spend it during the next 12 months or within the 2-year term of the loan? Jim's a single member LLC. So Jim, congratulations on your fund. Being a single member LLC, that will pay for your salary for the next 8 weeks. So that's good news. And that would be 75% of it. And then you would have 25% left over for other uses. Another couple of questions. can you start the webinars at 1 during the crisis? Governor Newsom updates California at 12. Well, in all due respect for the governor, we were doing these webinars far before he was coming on at 12. And these are available also by recording, as is DVR in the governor for later. So we're going to continue to do them at 12 because we've done them that way for, this is our 8th year. So I wished he'd pick a different time. Last couple of questions. I have to pay an employee and I was informed that I would be approved for PPP. Should I ask them to hold the check until it's processed? Let me read that one more time. I have to pay an employee and I was informed that I was approved for a PPP. Should I ask them to hold the check until it is processed? Mary, I don't have an answer for you. If you have to pay your employee, again, a lot of it's going to depend on when you execute the note on that PPP. That is going to be your start date for that purpose and moving forward for 60 days. So I wished I could help you a little bit better with that. I did receive some email questions, and for some reason I tend to forget these, but let me just answer a couple of these real quick for you. Here's a question, and we'll try to get some of these answered back to you. A lot of my employees might not want to come back, and I need to have more social distancing or more workforce distancing between employees. And without people coming back, can I put my family members on the payroll as new hires? I haven't seen anything that differentiates on the FTE about who you can and who you cannot hire. I don't believe there is any rules, unless it comes out in the final rule, about when you reach that composition of your full-time equivalents, that it can be or not be employees or family members. Okay, that's a wrap. We're going to wrap it up for today. Thanks again, and thanks for your questions. And we're going to be back next week, and going to be moving on a little bit next week, I think. Maybe we'll have final rules and we'll touch on that, but let's restart this economy and let's start talking about the positive steps that we can take in moving our businesses forward and bringing our businesses back to our communities that really, really enjoy them. So again, thank you very much for joining me. We'll be back next week. Hopefully I'll have a guest speaker, and they'll be able to take some of your questions and answer all of them. So for the SBDCs throughout the state of California and Central California, Kelly Bearden signing off for another webinar. We'll see you next Wednesday. Good luck, and I hope you get your PPPs. Goodbye now.